All right. Again, lakes and ponds. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because in class we've already kind of gone over this a couple times. But if you're at home, lakes and ponds, the big thing you need to know about lakes and ponds is they're freshwater, and you should be able to recognize the animals that live inside of a lake and pond. You shouldn't be thinking that it's giraffes or octopus or polar bears. You should, like fish and reptiles, snakes, turtles, frogs, those types of things for definite, but not any of these crazy things. Same thing when we're looking at our rivers and streams. You shouldn't be getting confused about the things that are in or around a river and stream with like a cactus. Like that's obviously in the desert. You're not going to hear of those things in a river or a stream. We did talk about ferns, and ferns are important because we find them on the banks of rivers, and that's a question that I've seen pop up on the EOG and benchmarks before. That's a little weird, especially if we don't know what a fern is, but now that we've taken time to learn what a fern is, we can move on through that. And you can watch these. So again, there's a video that we watched in class on wetlands by Bill Nye, and wetlands are exactly what they sound like. They are lands that are wet. That means they're like have tons of water in them. Swamps would be one of those. The most important thing, and you'll see it's got a star around it. This is, again, if you haven't written this in class in your notes, you probably should because it's on the anchor chart. Most of the plant life in the swamps are trees. Are there grasses? Sure, I see some grass right there, but most of the plant life in swamps are trees. And again, you should understand the types of animals that live in a swamp. Alligators, turtles, different types of reptiles, snakes, fish, birds, insects, most definitely mosquitoes, right? I mean, I think I got a mosquito bite looking at this picture. So that's swamps are not hard, and we didn't really take a whole lot of notes on swamps. To live in a swamp, you better have camouflage, right? If you are a pink frog, you're probably not going to make it very long because they're going to see you and eat you because everything around you is green. We watched a couple of videos on swamps and the creatures that live in swamps. You can do that at home. We talked about marshes, freshwater and saltwater. And Elle, man, she just had to use like all the power in her brain to tell me that in a freshwater marsh, there's freshwater, and in a saltwater marsh, there's probably saltwater. And I know that took a lot. I think she's going to take a nap now. She's done thinking for the rest of the day because that was super tough. Again, in all of these are all aquatic biomes. And you should be able to understand the types of animals that you would see in these places. But again, we don't need to dig super deep into that other than right here. Most of the plant life in a marsh is grass. That is very important. Swamps, trees, marsh, grass. You will see that again. I guarantee it. You can learn a little bit about the oversaturated soil and how it's gunky. And if you watch that video of Bill Nye trying to walk through it in those crazy boots he had on, you can see just how thick and muddy and horrible it would be to walk through that. We went through freshwater to saltwater marshes. And then we looked at the osprey, which is a bird that lives near all of these freshwater and some saltwater areas because it's a bird that eats fish. Just so you know that, it's a bird that eats fish. Looks like an owl. Here's a bog, terrible place to live because the ground there is terrible. And that moves us into today, which is terrestrial biomes. And Walker, you will notice the very first thing I wrote on the board is terrestrial. When I flip over the anchor chart for everybody else in class. Terrestrial. I wrote it in brown because the brown kind of reminds me of land. And a terrestrial biome has to do with land. There is no way every single biome that I write about from now on, my first two sentences are already finished. Grasslands are terrestrial biomes, period. Terrestrial means having to do with land. Tundra is a terrestrial biome, period. Terrestrial means having to do with land. Why would I do that? Because if you do that over and over and over in your notes, by the time we take the test, Grayson doesn't even have to think about the word terrestrial and aquatic. It is ingrained in your brain. You already know the answer to those. The first terrestrial biome we are going to study is grasslands. And I was like super disappointed. Listen, I love grasslands and they're very cool, but I thought we were doing the tundra first. And there's some really cool things about the tundra that are fun to get excited about. And I'm looking forward to it. But grasslands are interesting. And grasslands, shocker, the main plant life in grasslands are grass. We are going to look at two different grasslands today, unless we have a little extra time in here. We will see. Today we're mainly going to focus on the prairie. Now the prairies are found in North America, We live in North America. Prairies are found here. It's a very specific type of grassland. Again, the most important plants there are grass. Does that mean there's zero trees? No, this means that there's more grass than anything else. Let's think about this really quick, though. Look at all of the grass in that picture. If there's this much grass, there probably is a high concentration of what in this area? There's all this grass. That means what would probably be here? Herbivores. Herbivores, look at that. And I don't know if you can imagine you open your eyes and everywhere you look, there's like just pizza. And there's like different kinds of pizza all over the place. Like so much pizza that everybody in 5th grade would be able to hang out there and eat. And most of us would hang out there and eat, wouldn't we? Be like, oh my goodness, like there's so much pizza that I don't even have to compete with anyone. Like if just pizza. Move somewhere else if you want sushi. Like go somewhere else. But we would just everywhere's pizza and we don't have to fight over it. We could just sit there and graze on pizza all day long. But if there's a bunch of herbivores eating grass, there's probably also going to be some what in that area? Predators. They're going to come and say, hey, I'm no scientist, but I do know that they eat grass. They get their energy from the grass, and I eat them. Thus, we have a food chain, which is probably not what a cheetah is saying when he's chasing something down, or a bear when he's chasing something down in a grassland, or a fox, or anything else. They're probably not talking about food chains in their brain, but that's what's going on, right? Because now we have energy from the sun to the grass, energy from the grass to the herbivore, energy from the herbivore to the carnivore. And we have that food chain and eventually food webs moving on. So up until now, every time we've talked about estuaries, oceans, salt marshes, every time I'm like, all right, kids, what's the most important thing? And then I'll say it's the type of water, whether it's fresh water or salt water or brackish water. And I'm like, the climate, the soil, and the sunlight varies, right? It's a little different with grasslands. We don't get to say that anymore. So we're going to take some notes and we're going to look at how things aren't as varied. It gets a little bit more precise once we get onto land. So here's like the notes that we're taking on the grasslands, and you'll notice I said the prairie like this because when we get to the savanna, which is another type of grassland, things change a little bit. In the prairies, which are located here in North America, the water that falls, mostly falls, the precipitation, most precipitation, I abbreviated, comes as snow in the wintertime. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't rain in the summertime because it's grass. It needs to have moisture, right, in order to grow. We've noticed that with the plants in the window. The ones we didn't water never grew. What a shock. The climate, hot summers, cold winters. I think even we can look at that and say, I can identify with hot summers and cold winters. But they really don't have as much of a fall/spring as we do. They have a little bit of a spring. But once it starts to get cold, it just gets kind of cold in the prairie areas of North America. The soil, again, it varied in everything else, right? What's the soil of a lake and a pond? Well, it could be rocky, it could be muddy, it could be sandy. It varies. It's different here in the prairies. The soil here is actually really good. How do I know that? Look at all the plant life. If the soil wasn't good, it would look like the baseball field. Some plants would sprout, as we saw in our experiment in the window, but for the most part, nothing grows there. It has to be good soil in the grassland to have all of those grasses growing the way that they do. So it's the same notes on here that I have pretty much on the anchor chart. These are the notes that you should have written down in your notes about the grasslands right now. We haven't even started talking about the biotic factors. These are the abiotic factors of the grasslands. So here's the slide that goes along with the notes that we just wrote down. The temperatures in this biome vary greatly between summer and winter. Hot summers, cold winters. You can get up to 100 degrees in the summertime. That's pretty toasty. That's like a little warmer than us. Rain in the temperate grasslands occurs in late spring and early summer. It's about 20 to 35 inches, which makes sense. You have to have a lot of water for the grass to grow, but much of that, 20 to 35 inches, falls as snow in the winter. Fire is not foreign to grasslands, whether that is a person having a gender reveal party and they start a fire, which is how that huge fire started in California, or lightning strikes. Now, you might be saying, Mr. Bullens, hang on. You got all these animals eating the grass. You have fires that burn down, whether they're naturally or man-made. How does this grass keep growing? And it's very, very interesting. You can cut grass all the way down to the top of the dirt, because underneath the dirt is the roots where the grass is actually, it has a very, very low growth point. Think about, like, your dad would love it if he only had to mow once, and that's it, right? But that's not how it works. He mows Saturday, and then the next Saturday, what's he do? He gets up and complains, I can't believe I have to mow again today. I just mowed last week. Why? Because grass keeps growing. But isn't that important? Otherwise, the herbivores would eat, and then they'd have to move somewhere else. Or the fire would burn through, and they'd have to move somewhere else. Grass has a very special adaptation with that low growth point, which is really, really important. I feel like estuaries here. Again, where I kept saying brackish water over and over again. Every slide. Grasses dominate the grasslands. There are trees, there are shrubs and bushes, but they're not abundant. They're not all over the place. You do not have to know the species of grasses like wild oats and buffalo grass. You do need to know that the animals like the herbivores eat the grass. And again, this other stuff is what we just talked about. Grass has a very low growth point. And so it's able to survive being eaten and if there's a wildfire that moves through. Grassland animals. If you live in a grassland and you think about it, it's just a big giant flat land with a bunch of grass, right? That's all it is. So up here, we're like some herbivores and we're eating, and we look and we see, oh no, there's a Leah. It's coming after us. What do? There's not a lot of trees to run up. Where do you run? It's just flat ground. Leahs are very fast and they can get you. What do? Yes, a lot of these animals burrow underground. They have their homes underground, which is how they are able to survive living in a grassland. That is a very special adaptation that these animals have to have, is they're able to burrow underground. Now, if you happen to be an ungulate, this really weird word here, that just means something with hooves. If you're like a deer or a horse, I happen to be faster than a Leah, and I can get away from her because, number one, I have super tall legs. I see it from way away. My tail goes up, I run, and everybody else with me runs away, and she just stands there frustrated and hungry. Maybe hangry, I don't know. Maybe that's what's wrong with predators. Like, they're just hangry all the time. They need a Snickers bar or something, right? So it's important to understand how these animals survive in a grassland. I do recommend for the people at home watching this video, because it talks about the prairie dogs and how they are very, very important and how they fulfill an extremely important niche in their ecosystem. As a matter of fact, we're going to call them something called a keystone species. And I know a lot of people say, what in the world is a keystone species? Well, a keystone, look, here we go. See how they built this arch? Do you see this stone in the middle of the arch? And this one here? What's going to happen if I rip that stone out? Everything else is going to fall. So if I tell you that there is an animal or a plant that is a keystone species, what does that tell you about it? Anna? If something happens to that species, the whole ecosystem is going to collapse. That means they're very, very important. So again, if you're at home, you're wrong one. You really need to make sure you watch this video, and we're going to watch it as soon as I finish this recording. I only have 30 seconds left anyway, so it's a good thing that we're stopping here for today. So again, if you're at home, smash the like button and subscribe. Thank you for doing so. I think I went over 200 subscribers. Woo, that's amazing. All right, here we go. All right, see you later.